You're on. We'll be looking at the 6th chapter of the book of Daniel, very familiar scripture. Just a little bit of setting. Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, had been slain, and Darius, referred to as Darius the Median, took the kingdom, and Darius was about 62 years old. And as Darius set up his administration or his kingship, it's where our lesson picks up. And I'm going to read the first few verses in the 6th chapter. It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 princes, which should be over the whole kingdom, and over these 3 presidents, of whom Daniel was first, that the princes might give accounts unto them, and the king should have no damage. Then this Daniel was preferred above the presidents and princes, because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king thought to set him over the whole realm. So as Darius had began his kingship, he began to put people in positions. The Bible tells us that over the kingdom, 120 princes, and over these were 3 presidents, and Daniel was the first or the main or top president, and this was to protect the king. My understanding, any administrative duties these princes and kings would handle a lot of the administrative responsibilities. And notice the 3rd verse, that Daniel was preferred above the presidents and princes because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king thought to set him over the whole realm. So Daniel had found favor with the king, and that was because of his excellent spirit. That excellent spirit was because of his relationship with God. Daniel was very dedicated in his worship of God, and as we'll get on in the lesson, we'll see where he prayed at least 3 times a day, and I believe that was the excellent spirit that he allowed God to lead him in a godly manner. And evidently this upset some of the other presidents and princes, and they formed a conspiracy against Daniel. They sought to find a reason, but they could find none on Daniel, anything he had done, no fault. And we'll look at pick up again with the 4th verse. Then the presidents and princes sought to find occasion against Daniel concerning the kingdom, but they could find none occasion nor fault, for as much as he was faithful, neither was there any error or fault found in him. Then said these men, we shall not find an occasion against this Daniel, except we find it against him concerning the law of his God. Then these presidents and princes assembled together to the king, and said thus unto the king, King Darius, live forever. All the presidents of the kingdom, the governors, and the princes, the counselors, and the captains have consulted together to establish a royal statute, and to make a firm decree that whosoever shall ask a petition of any god or man for 30 days, save of thee, O king, he shall be cast into the den of lions. Now, O king, establish the decree and sign the writing, that it be not changed according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which altered not. Wherefore King Darius signed the writing and the decree. So this conspiracy by the presidents, the princes, the other counselors, was to get Daniel out of his position. Daniel was faithful in his worship of God. He was faithful to King Darius, as long as it was in accordance with godly principles. And we could kind of think of Daniel as a advisor to the king, or his chief advisor. And so in this conspiracy, they could not find a fault with Daniel. The only thing was that was concerning his worship of God. And they assembled together and went to King Darius, addressed him, and shared that they had consulted together and asked that he establish a royal statute and make a decree that whoever shall ask a petition of any god or man for 30 days other than to the king should be cast into the lion's den. This group knew of Daniel's commitment to God, his faithfulness to prayer, and they knew that was the only way that they thought they could destroy Daniel. They encouraged the king to sign this writing, and according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, once it's signed, it could not be altered. And think about one thing that stands out to me. This decree was for only 30 days. It was not a permanent decree. So they knew that that with this short term, that Daniel would break this decree in probably either the same day it was signed or the next day, depending on the time that it was signed by the king. And so the king signed it according to the law. Once it was signed, it cannot be changed. And think about how this group that should have been working together, how that they felt Daniel as a threat. And they saw his faithfulness, his commitment to God. And instead of learning from that they may obtain that same commitment through Daniel's life, and I'm sure that Daniel had opportunity. He would share with his the others on this, princes and counselors and all, about God. But they felt Daniel as more of a threat, it appears to me, and they wanted him destroyed. So they basically tricked the king into signing this decree and thinking they would do away with Daniel. What they didn't realize was the power of God and Daniel's commitment to God and his faithfulness. God was faithful to him. Picking back up with the 10th verse, when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house, and his windows being open in his chamber toward Jerusalem, he knelt upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God as he did aforetime. Daniel didn't let this decree change him. He didn't cave in, so to speak, to this decree that the king Darius had signed. He remained faithful and prayed to God. That shows us his commitment, even though he knew that what the outcome likely would be, that he would be probably taken into custody in the decree that he would be cast into the lion's den. But he was faithful to God. He knew that God would deliver him. Maybe not in the way that God did as we get on into this chapter, but he knew no matter what that God would deliver him, that whether at this point, whether he was cast into the lion's den and the lions devoured him, that his soul and his spirit would be with God. Do we have that same commitment today as Christians? Do we speak out and take a stand for God as Daniel did? We look at our state of our country. I would say that there's a lot that's not took a firm stand for God. This group of men, they assembled, and I'm not going to read all of these verses. They came near where Daniel was praying, and Scripture tells us that Daniel was praying and making supplication before his God. His God is the same God that we serve today. And this group of men knew Daniel's commitment. They thought, well, we've got him now. It's just a matter of time. And so they reported back to the king concerning the decree they had gotten him to sign. And I think the king was kind of upset at himself for signing this, because he had a close working relationship with Daniel. And at the 14th verse tells us, then the king, when he heard these words, was sore displeased with himself, and set his heart on Daniel to deliver him. And he labored till the going down of the sun to deliver him. He sought a way he could deliver Daniel from this punishment that he was facing, that Daniel was facing. And then this group of men came back and said unto the king, you know the law of the Medes and the Persians. This decree cannot be changed, which you signed, which you established. Daniel was then cast into the lion's den that evening. The king commanded that they brought Daniel and cast him into the den of lions. And this is what the king said to Daniel. Daniel, thy God whom thou servest continually, he will deliver thee. I think that through King Darius seeing Daniel's commitment and his faithfulness to God, his heart was changing. Up to this point, very little known about Darius, but we see that he was upset with himself and what he shared to Daniel, that God would deliver him. Tells me that God was working in his life. We don't know if he became a believer at this point in the Scriptures of God, but he was upset at himself, and he knew that God would deliver Daniel. He probably was not thinking that God would deliver Daniel in the manner that he did. And so Daniel was cast into the lion's den. A stone was brought and placed upon the mouth of the den, or the opening of the den, so that Daniel couldn't escape, so that the lions couldn't escape. And the king sealed it with his own signet or seal. if you would have it. Think about how this parallels when Jesus was placed in that borrowed tomb after he was crucified. A stone was placed in the opening of that tomb, and the seal was put on it. Very parallel. They thought they could keep the body of Jesus in that tomb. This group of men thought that Daniel would be destroyed and that he would no longer be a threat. Jesus, in the day that he was crucified and buried in that borrowed tomb, he was considered a threat by a lot of the people of that day. And they thought they had done away with him, just as this group of men thought they were doing away with Daniel. That's the power of our God that we serve. He delivered Daniel. Jesus arose from that tomb. They couldn't contain him in that tomb. If we will let God have that power in our lives, think how much stronger our Christian walk would be. How much greater influence we would have with the people we come into contact with on a daily basis. After the lion's den was sealed, the Bible tells us the king went to his palace. He fasted that night. Typical, there were musical instruments that would be played for the king. He did not want those to be played. And the last portion of the 18th verse, his sleep went from him. In other words, the king did not sleep that night. He was worried about Daniel and what he had done by signing that decree and by Daniel having to be cast into that lion's den. He knew that God would deliver Daniel one way or another. He just didn't know in what manner at this point. The next morning in the 19th verse, then the king arose very early in the morning and went in haste unto the den of lions. And when he came to the den, he cried with a lamentable voice unto Daniel. And the king spake and said to Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God, is thy God whom thou servest continually able to deliver thee from the lions? Then said Daniel unto the king, O king, live forever. My God hath sent his angel, and hath shut the lions' mouths, that they have not hurt me, forasmuch as before him innocency was found in me, and also before thee, O king, have I done no hurt. Very early, probably as it was breaking day or daylight, the king went to the lion's den to check on Daniel. And notice how he addressed, and the king did not, or King Darius did not know the condition of Daniel at this point. O Daniel, servant of the living God, is thy God whom thou servest continually, able to deliver thee from the lions. King Darius saw Daniel's commitment to God, how that he served God continually, and he came to check on him. And I'm sure from the scriptures, 18th through the 21st 22nd verse, that King Darius was very concerned about Daniel. And he had hoped. Scripture doesn't tell us that. He prayed. But he hoped that no harm had come to Daniel. And through God's protection, through God's working in Daniel's life, working in the lines, no harm came to Daniel. Daniel replied, "O king, live forever. My God has sent his angel and has shut the lion's mouth. They have not hurt me, for as much as before him in the sea was found in me, and also before thee, O king, have I done no hurt." 23rd verse, then was the king exceedingly glad for him, and commanded they should take Daniel up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no manner of hurt was found upon him, because he believed in his God. Is our faith today as strong as Daniel's? If we were cast into a lion's den today, would our faith be strong enough in God that trusting him to deliver us? A lot of people today, they think this was looking at this, would think that this would be a situation that was no way Daniel could come out alive. But he did. And as Christians today, no matter what we face in life, we can be victorious through God. We may lose our life, but our victory is through our faith in Jesus Christ and the assurance that we'll get to be with Jesus and God in heaven and see them face to face. Daniel knew that no matter what the outcome would be when he was cast into the lion's den, that he was going to remain faithful to God. Do we let the things of this world influence us? Do we let people we're around influence us? Or do we remain faithful to God and influence them through God working through us to them? Had a coworker tell me a couple weeks ago that there in the office where I work, how much a difference my presence in that office building had made. And they've been working there a long time. I just try to be faithful and live for God each day. That's what Daniel did. The King Darius then commanded that these men that had accused Daniel to be brought, and he commanded them to be cast into the den of lions. Not only these men, but their children, their wives, and they did not fare as well as Daniel. Number one, they did not believe in God, the true living God. And then the lions, Scripture tells us the lions had the mastery of them and break all their bones in pieces or ever they came at the bottom of the den. 25th verse, then King Darius wrote unto all people, nations, languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied unto you. I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom men tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God and steadfast forever, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall be even unto the end. He delivered and rescued it, and he worketh signs and wonders in heaven and in earth. Who hath delivered Daniel from the power of the lions? So this Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. As we look at these closing verses of the 6th chapter of Daniel, King Darius made a decree, not only to his people, but to nations, all languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied unto you. In every dominion of my kingdom, that men tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. So we see that God had worked in King Darius' life here in this scripture by the decree he made. Notice that in every dominion of my kingdom men tremble and fear before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God and steadfast forever, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall be even unto the end. Do you think King Darius recognized at this point what the impact of this decree he was making, what he was stating in this decree? That Daniel's God until the end, the same God that we serve today, that delivered Daniel out of that lion's den. That decree that King Darius made, we can see the evidence of it today. I believe that during this experience that King Darius became a believer of the true and living God. Does anyone have any questions, thoughts, comments, anything they would like to share? Anyone a word? If not, Gene Wheeler, would you dismiss us?